Hi there, in this video, as you probably see from the title, I want to talk about how when you're making your work, you really do need to forget about making art. And that might seem like a little bit of a strange thing to say, if you're trying to make paintings, trying to make drawings, images, interesting stuff on paper, board, canvas, whatever. You want to make something interesting, but what is that if it's not making art? So let's get into it. I want to show you some of my drawings and paintings that I do outside and then what I do with them and how I think about them. All of the work I do comes from observation. It comes from being outside, making drawings, making paintings, even taking photographs as reference to work from. So it's all about the experience of being outside in the landscape and thinking about what I can do with it. How can I represent that? How can I translate that and communicate what I think, what I feel about it into some paintings so that when people are looking at them, they get a similar kind of enjoyment or experience back off the painting to the one that I had when I was there. So that's what it's all about. That's the driving kind of purpose behind what I'm doing, trying to communicate that experience of being in the landscape. But while I'm beginning that process, while I'm outside gathering that information and having that experience, I really do want to forget about making art with a capital letter, painting with a capital P. It's not about that. And I think if you constantly think about what it's going to look like when it's finished, if you're outside, you're sitting outside or you're walking or you're experiencing something, but while you're having that experience outside in the landscape, if all you're thinking about is what will this look like as a painting, what will it look like when it's finished? What will people think of it? Is it going to be successful? Is it art? And I think if you start out that way, then you're actually limiting your creative possibilities. I've just got a couple of paintings and drawings here in front of me. So I'll just sort of talk you through them because they don't really look like anything. These drawings, it's just charcoal on paper. I was sitting outside and just making marks and responding to it and enjoying being there. So I really am not thinking about making art and just using the drawing as a way of looking. And that's how I want to use these pieces. Now, I'm not even thinking about what I'm going to do with them later on, because the most important function of drawings and in a minute paintings like this is that allow me to spend the time outside. Like I said, they don't really look like very much. But I also know that if I work in this way, that I can get something out of it and I will produce something interesting from it. Because these drawings and paintings really do allow me to just be there and not be thinking about anything else. I'm looking, responding to what's there, making marks on the paper, and just soaking in the atmosphere, soaking in what's around me. And again, I would never dream of taking a painting like this, putting a frame around it and calling it finished. It's just not the function of this kind of work. It's just acrylic paint on paper with a bit of pastel. I'm just making marks, enjoying being there. I think that's a really important part of this process. It's being able to enjoy the experience of being in the landscape and bringing that back to the studio, because I've done a lot of painting over the years where I've taken boards or canvases out with me or large pieces of watercolor paper, and I've done a lot of start to finish paintings outside where I've sat down, picked a spot, sat down and just started painting and tried to make something out of it. Now, a lot of those paintings, I really like them, but I also remember what it was like doing them, and it can be quite stressful. You're trying to produce something, you're trying to think of everything, the composition, the colour, the marks, the way it all sits on the board together, the balance of the image, the surface, trying to do everything at once, on the spot, start to finish. Now, like I said, I've done a lot of that, but I remember the experience as not being particularly enjoyable. I've got a lot out of it and I've done the work, but it can be a little bit of a struggle, and it's probably quite familiar to a lot of you when you're thinking, I'm battling with my paintings. Oh, I battled with this painting. And that's very negative, isn't it? It's a very kind of negative way of thinking about it. But working like this, I always enjoy working outside. It's very loose, it's not finished in any way, and I would never dream of exhibiting pieces like this. But I know that working like this, I can really enjoy it. And that's so important, to bring back that positive experience. I also know that I can get something out of it in the studio. Because what I do with pieces like this is I always bring them back to the studio and I'll work with them in my big sketchbooks. So I like to work on these big A2 pieces of paper, and I'll bring them back to the studio. And this is just the kind of charcoal on paper, as I was showing you just now on that larger piece. And I like to crop them down, collage them, just muck around with them and try and be creative with the things that I've produced outside. So I'm not trying to do everything at once. I'm just using that experience of being outside, making the marks, and then bringing them back to the studio and doing something with them. So it's part of a process. It's the beginning of a process, the work outside. It's not the whole process. And that's just so important, because I wouldn't produce pieces like this. I really enjoy this piece. It's got a lot of interesting marks, and I actually remember I was in Greece, actually, standing on the beach and looking out over the sea, and I was really just thinking about the colours and making the marks, and you know, that experience is there in my mind, and I can put myself back in that place looking at this painting. And that's what it's all about, being able to put myself back in the place. But I would never have produced something quite as interesting, I think. I really like the composition of this piece. I like the marks, I like the balance between the light and the darks, the different colours. So this painting puts me back in that place in my mind. And I really feel that's what it's all about, is giving back to me something of what I felt while I was there. And I don't think I would have done a piece like this directly. I mean, I did all the marks that are on here were made on the spot, but I just rearranged them, recomposed them, and made something a little bit more interesting out of it, something more creative for myself. And these are all done in the same way, really loose, pretty rough paintings done outside on the spot, but energetic and enjoyable. Not trying to make art, capital A, just using that time outside to find marks, shapes, colours, textures I can bring back to the studio, you know, and play around with and see where it takes me. So all of these are done in exactly the same way. And actually it's got some pieces in here, I think, and I find things like this. So this is a larger piece on canvas, and I did a series like this. This is a while back, but I did a series of these paintings, larger paintings on canvas that came from those rough sketches taken to my sketchbook, worked on, experimented with. Some have been more successful than others, and then I used those as a reference for larger studio work. So as I was saying, forget about making art. If all you're thinking about is what it's going to look like when it's finished, then you're not there, you're not in that moment and actually looking and seeing and experiencing what's around you. If you're worried about what it's going to look like when it's finished, you're worried about what other people may think of it, then you're not in the right frame of mind. So forget about making art, just make marks, find colours, textures, shapes, lines. Just respond to what's there. Make a mark on the paper, and then you can think about what you're going to do with it later on when you get back to your studio, and you can calmly think about what you're doing. So if you want to go into this process in much more detail, then why don't you join me on an online course or on my membership group? There's so much here on my website now. I'd really love to see you on a course or on the members group. Okay, enjoy your painting, and I'll see you soon.